G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. 12 days ago, using the look a long way offoscope. So now would be a good time. 20 to 11 local current time versus 20 past 10 Eastern Standard Mean Time. Considering that the top of the generator hutch is only vaguely roughly aligned with the meridian, I'm going to say that's good enough. It's time. Put on the camouflaged apocalypse suit. Don. The apocalypse hat. Apply the pebble glasses. Pick up the tools of the trade and venture forth. Dragonfly did but see me and then flee and fly. If they had them in chuffs, I would have translated that as man, man come, man come. As a warning, because around here, the black and white magpie rules this part of the forest. Clearly. Yeah, that is the first time I've ever realised that there are times when magpies vocalise using the same calls that the chuffs use. To clarify that, let me say that when the chuffs call Igor, Igor, that means there's an eagle circling overhead, and all the bowerbirds, all the grey fantails, all the wagtails, all the wrens, all the robins, all the little birds that live down low in the forest under the canopy, they all run for cover because the chuffs have a high guard, and the chuffs' high guard has spotted the circling eagle. Awk, 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 awk. There's chuffs warning about a hawk. Man is either human or it's a ground predator. Cat, fox, snake, they're all pretty self-explanatory. Today, bunch of black and white magpies were calling man, com, man, com, as they vacated the area. So the same call with the same technical meaning was being used in a reverse context. Instead of calling me to come with them, it was warning every other critter that I was coming. There's a bloody lot going on in the forest. And yeah, the more you learn, the more you find out you don't know. When it all comes down to it. Solitary native bees. Okay, that's the little stretch of the highway. And yeah, we can see the wind turbines in the town. We can see pretty much from Yarraford Road turn off a kilometre north. Okay, so we can see the wind farms. We have a big horizon. And we have the highway. And it's 11 o'clock in the morning on Easter Monday. Can go just a little bit past there. And now that's Yarraford Road, the far tree line. And we have a truck. We have a truck going south. Looks like it's loaded with steel. Blue steel, perhaps? Pardon the pun. Or is it? Maybe it's a tanker. Stainless steel would be blue, reflecting the sky. And it does seem to have oval cross sections. Okay, lost him. So, Australia's been shut down for 3 weeks, and there are some, well, I'd call them raw prawns with cooked heads, who are calling for the economy to be permitted to reboot. The loudest of these raw prawns with cooked heads are from the New South Wales Rugby Football League, and they're being cheered on by the New South Wales state leader of the National Party. That means he's the Deputy Premier. Oh, we have cars. Deputy Premier, a fella called John Barilaro. He's a notorious science denialist. His policy is if it moves, shoot it. If it doesn't move, chop it down. If you can't get your axe into it, try dynamite. And if it's that big, maybe you can rent it out for advertising space. So yeah, John Barilaro is backing the Rugby Football League, which wants to start playing again. But the Premier of Queensland has said, well, you're going to have to go into quarantine for 14 days every time you come to Queensland before you're going to be allowed out to talk to anybody, because the lockdown applies to footballers as well as everybody else. Oh, boo-hoo, sob, sob. According to the National Party leader in New South Wales, rugby league is the critical essence of Australian society in New South Wales. Nothing matters but rugby league. We've got to get rugby league going to show that civilisation still exists in New South Wales. Meanwhile, Australia's got a transmission rate of 0.84. We've driven the transmission rate down below the magical 1.055, below which it has to get in order for you to get control of this particular virus. If you leave everything to take its course, like say the Swedes are doing, then you're going to have a transmission number of 1.3. And that's how we were when we had case numbers doubling every 3 days. The case numbers are now doubling maybe once every 8 or 10 days in Australia. We've got on top of it pretty good. So we have. Most of our cases come from overseas. They've flown in on an aeroplane, or they've got off a cruise ship, or they've been in contact with somebody who got off an aeroplane or got off a cruise ship. And all the people who thought that they had some kind of special magical union negotiated relationship with the virus, it meant they didn't have to go into quarantine, like Qantas pilots and cabin staff who've been coming back from all over the world, bringing stranded Australians back inside the island Festung, Fortress Australia. But everybody who gets off the cabin, passenger-wise, they've had to go into quarantine, but not the stewards, the stewardesses, the pilots, the co-pilots. It's just been this really stupid idea, nearly as stupid as the idea that the Ruby Princess was docked. It had 1,700 people on board or something. Maybe it was 2,700. There was a bloody lot of them, and there was 150 of them had, respiratory infections or chest symptoms. And I think 9 of them had already tested positive for COVID-19, or SARS coronavirus 2. And some, again, raw prawn with a cooked head at the New South Wales Department of Health, decided to agree with the owners of the cruise ship, who said, oh, look, there are no positive test results on all of these people. They should be allowed off. Excuse me? They've been tested, the results are not back yet, so you want to let them loose into society? Well, yeah, the people on the cruise ship wanted to let them loose into society because they didn't want to be stuck with the problem of feeding and housing all these non-fare paying passengers. So, was that incompetence? Was it malfeasance? Was it corruption? Was somebody bribed? Did somebody who worked at the Department of Health have shares in Carnival Cruises, I think was the name of the company? Yeah, Carnival Cruises. So far, nobody knows, was the quiet response. So in Australia, we've now got less than 100 new cases per day. Deaths are going down. Everything's looking pretty good. The thing is, we've still got about 50 new cases per day, every day, from community transmission, where we've got no idea where they got the disease from. No amount of contact tracing has come up with any solutions there. Missed one. Little white thing. So, we've only achieved this situation by dint of the strict lockdown. There are people who say, oh, domestic violence is going up and people are getting anxious and people are going broke and boo-hoo and sob and mortgages aren't being paid and loans aren't being repaid and money's not being made. And isn't it, can't we just get back to normal pretty please? And happily, most of the politicians have accepted that the virologists and the epidemiologists, A, know what they're talking about, and B, just because you don't like what the facts are doesn't mean the facts are going to change. And the facts are that unless you keep things in this lockdown situation, until you've got maybe less than 10 community transmissions per day, maybe less than 5, maybe get it all the way down to none. Then as soon as you lift your foot off and say, okay, we can reopen restaurants, or we can get the schools going back to normal, or we can let people start going back to the gym. As soon as you do that, if you've got 10 cases, then in 3 days you'll have 20 cases, and then 3 days later you'll have 40 or 50 cases, and it just it spirals, it goes exponential. What you have to do is either achieve herd immunity, which is going to take everybody in the population getting sick, and somewhere between 1 and, well, I would say 4% of the population succumbing to an acute respiratory illness. Some places where there's little or no public health, where people are living overcrowded on a poor diet, you could be looking at 15 to 30% of your population actually dying. If you want to get the best numbers I've struck on the Internoodle, on YouTube, look for a channel called Voice of Thunder. And Philip, I think his name is. By the sound of him, he's British born. I think he might have an American passport, and last I heard he was living in Bohemia somewhere. He's got a PhD in nuclear physics research, and he seems to work as a freelance nuclear physics technician. He's good at crunching numbers. His video today, he told us that all it will take for COVID-19 to go exponential again, i.e. for the transmission rate to climb above 1.055, would be for one person in every 6 to decide that they weren't going to pay attention to the lockdown because they were bored, or they thought it was a hoax, or they thought it was all being caused by the 5G mobile phone towers, or they're libertarians and they don't want to be told what to do by the government, or they're washed in the blood of the Jesus and therefore they can go and lick lampposts to prove that there's no virus. Whatever their excuse is, it only takes 1 in 6. And that can send the whole thing exponential again. And Thunderfoot, which is the name of his other channel, with the double O being replaced by 2 zeros if you go looking for it. What Thunderfoot suggests is that it's bloody hard to get 80–85% compliance with anything in any society. The Chinese were able to do it, and they've only got maybe 0.2% of their population has been exposed to the virus. So they live in perpetual fear of having another outbreak, and they're living with almost lockdown conditions where they're tracking everybody using mobile phones to see where they've been, and if you haven't got a green code on your mobile phone, you can't go into some places, like supermarkets. Okay. Well, I just had a phone call from my son. He wants to come out and get a bit of firewood, so Daddy Warbles is going to have to call a halt to the video, but that gives you some idea of how good the shutdown is. And yeah, we may be forced into the lockdown for at least another year, because it takes a year and a half to get a vaccine proven safe, done, dusted, and I don't know how long it's going to take to get doses made up after that. And you really can't reboot society until you've got such a thing under control. Not unless you're willing to see anywhere from a 4% to a 30% death rate. And the difficulty, which I don't know whether Thunder Chief has figured in, is that because of the creation of credit, everybody has already spent their next 20 to 40 years expected earnings. I don't know how long printing money is going to work as a solution to keep the whole thing ticking over. So, the more you think about it, the more far-reaching and complicated this all gets. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. I think you got something like 15 minutes of consistent, solid, uninterrupted observation through the look-along wayoscope. And now I must adjourn. Ciao.